Hello, Ambassador.
Hello, hello, hello.
How are you?
Fine, fine. I hope you are fine too.
I'm very well. My name is Esfina. I'm the moderator for the session.
I see.
Yes.
Okay, it's really a great pleasure to meet you.
Nice meeting you too.
Yes, but like I say, I will not stay longer. I have to leave the office 3:30 because I have another engagement at 4:00.
Yes.
Yes, so
Madame Giraldine told me that we start with Professor Bayo.
Yes.
And then yourself. Yes. And then you could leave at that stage.
Yes, I was just going to. I have sent my speech already. If I go not really according to it because I'm in a hurry, then I leave. Then
thank you so much.
Yes, then I will leave because of the other engagement. So I want to thank you for the opportunity to join. Yes.
No, you're most welcome.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Welcome.
Thank you.
Hi, Jenna.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you.
Are you ready?
I'm ready. I speak a lot, so I'm normally not nervous, but today I'm speaking with many highly esteemed speakers, so I'm nervous, but I'm happy.
Good for you.
I'm just quickly checking that my presentation shares. Can you see it okay?
Yeah.
Okay, then I just need to just check that it goes into present. Okay, that's perfect. Take it off. Oops. There we go. All right, great.
Sorry.
Where are you based?
I'm in Joburg.
In Joburg, is it very cold there?
No, it's not. It's just that I'm recovering from a cold.
Oh,
it's quite chilly, but not like.
Okay, I'm in Durban, and it's very cold for us Durban people, and we're not used to the cold.
Whatever it is, it must be warmer than Joburg.
Well, we're not coping very well because we're not used to the cold. I feel like it's snowing or something.
Yeah. Hello, Zoe.
Hi, how are you?
Fine, thanks. How are you?
Good, thank you. Thanks for having me here.
Hi, Zoe. Nice to meet you. I'm looking forward to what everyone has to share because it's such an important issue.
It is. Yeah.
And you'll see we're looking into all the mis and disinformation, and I mean, it's really terrible. It's so coordinated.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, Geraldine. Lovely to meet you.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How are you?
Good afternoon, Dr. Nkosazana.
Good afternoon.
How are you?
I'm okay, thanks. And you?
I'm good. I am moderating this session.
Okay.
And I understand you're coming last now in the program.
Yes, let me come last for a change.
Okay. All right.
Let me listen to other people.
Yes. Okay.
I'm trying to get my camera on, but
Hello,
Or-
Michelle.
it says permission for camera was denied. Okay,
Oh,
sure.
really?
Yeah.
Let me check with Geraldine.
Are you there?
Let me check with, let me send a message.
Okay. Because I can't see how it looks.
I thought it was unlimited because other people just put it on.
Well, I'm trying to put it on. It says denied, so I don't know.
Lutando? Hi, Lutando.
Hi, Ma'am Hesfina.
How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. Ma'am Geraldine is actually driving. She's on the road. When I last spoke to her about 30
No,
minutes
I'm here. Thank you,
Oh,
everyone. I have
okay.
arrived, so I'm
All right.
fine. Good afternoon, everyone. Yes.
Could we allow for video, please? For people to enable video if they want to.
I think it is enabled.
Hello, Your Excellency.
Pardon?
I'm greeting Her Excellency, Nkosazana.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm okay. Thank you.
Long time no see.
Indeed. I have to reduce my luggage.
So it took Afrophobia for us to see each other again.
Yeah.
That's not good.
As you know, well, maybe you are not aware, I was under the weather actually.
Oh, no, I wasn't aware.
Yeah, since Mojanku was aware, I was under the weather for some time.
Yes, I was aware.
Yeah.
You're still coming back, my brother.
Yeah, no, I'll be okay.
Dumela Nkosazana.
Hello.
Hey, Geraldine.
Hi, Mujangu.
Oh, Hesfina, you look like Geraldine. Are we waiting for someone? Hesfina, you are running this.
Yes, it's 3 o'clock, and
You
I
are
think
waiting for people to join.
maybe we'll give them 1 minute because Ambassador is running behind her schedule and
Yeah.
she needs to take after Professor Bayo. So maybe 1 second, but the speakers are here, so we could possibly start. So welcome everyone. I am the moderator for this session, which has long been awaited for by some of us. And we're here now, Migration Realities, the case of Afrophobia in South Africa. Our panelists are all here, but the order of their speaking is going to change. Nothing else on the program is going to change. We are going to start with Prof. Adebayo Olukoshi, who's going to be taking us through his views on migration and forced displacement in Africa. After that, we go to Ambassador Maria Gustava, the Mozambique ambassador to South Africa. And I will introduce the other speakers as we go along. Professor Adebayo, please take the floor. We have 15 minutes for the keynote speaker by Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, who's going to speak at the end, but for everybody else, it's 12 minutes. Please take the floor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Faatima. As I thought about the topic of our conversation, repeatedly, I went back into and that history is basically to say that one, we all originated from the same stock. Some of you might remember the thesis on Gondwana before the splitting of the continent and the dispersal of population from the continent to other parts of the world. You might also recall that the Olduvai God in Eastern Africa was an important tool for both the rise and dispersal of populations and civilizations. So also cases of civilization in South Africa. I go back into that history basically to say that we are in a world of migrants. We are all migrants. Even if we do not remember where we came from for various reasons, we came from somewhere else to where we are today. And therefore, it is important to remind ourselves of the fact that there is no pure native in any part of the continent or the world. If I take the particular example of our continent, it's even more directly clear that we have many people who can trace first and second generation relations across the border. The number of South Africans who have relations in Zimbabwe, the number of Nigerians who have relations in Benin Republic, Niger Republic, the number of Senegalese who have relations in Mali, and so on and so forth. So that in a certain sense, migration and mobility, I will add mobility to it, is part of the DNA of us human beings. But what has happened recently in South Africa, which is of course not the first time, but perhaps the most violent that we have seen, probably should compel us to ask critical questions about the nature of governance in our countries. First and foremost, poverty and inequality have become excruciating. Feelings of exclusion, feelings of domination, feelings of people not enjoying the social contract between state and society. And in that context, the tendency is there as an easy option to begin to scapegoat the other. And in a sense, the xenophobic or Afrophobic uprising is not very shocking. Foreigners are taking our jobs, not so much because the foreigners are really taking your jobs, but because you feel so excluded that the only people to take it out on are the foreigners, so-called foreigners. And I think maybe one question that we will need to answer in this conversation is how it has happened that there once was a time in the past when political parties, particularly progressive political parties and movements, were the ones who led society as opposed to following society. What I think I find a bit disheartening is that political society, almost across the board, has been following the Afrophobic mob rather than leading opinion in the country. When the most recent demands for foreigners to go back home came up in Ghana, particularly aimed at Nigerians, it took the courage of President Mahama to remind Ghanaians of the bonds that exist between Nigeria and Ghana, and to ask people to go back home and sheath their swords. There was no violence. There was a demonstration of a persistent kind for a few days. And that, for me, is a good example of how political society can lead society in a very credible manner. What we have seen in the last few weeks is almost a case of political society abandoning the field to the mobs and effectively not having control over the way events are unfolding. So, first point, it is a world of migrants. Second point, that even when migration causes a lot of tensions, it is important that political society should take leadership and not simply abandon the field. The third point, which is contained in the concept notes, is the example of Europe. The example of Europe has shown us what happens when migration, whether forced, voluntary, or otherwise, is weaponized. In the rise of extreme right-wing movements, almost racist movements. We've seen that across Europe and in the Trump administration. I'm not very sure whether extreme right elements will run the field in South Africa, but one thing I know is that when you begin to scapegoat the other, it is only a matter of time before you move from foreigners to your own nationals. Before Zulus begin to go against Xhosas, before Xhosas begin to go against Hutus, in what will become basically an inter-ethnic conflict. And examples abound of this evolution of the ordering of migrants. Now, to stem this, it is important that the root cause of disaffection should be addressed in a very systematic manner. What do I mean by that? It means that failures of governance and development that have left many behind and generated resentment need to be addressed urgently. The social contract has to be rebuilt in order that the ordinary South African, the ordinary African, can have faith in their political leadership and in the state. In 1994, after the independence of South Africa, there was a play that was performed at the workshop theater in Johannesburg. And it presented fairly the same scenario of antagonism between settlers and migrants, settlers and natives, and conflictual situations that were arising. But it was resolved in the end by saying, welcome, welcome, everybody, welcome, welcome, largely because of the recognition that migrants also bring value. Migrants bring value. Very few examples exist of migrants moving from one location to the other and just simply loafing around or engaging in wanton criminality. And I think more can be done by governments, including South African governments, to tap into the benefits of migration for the South African economy and society. Wouldn't it be nice if I could visit a South African home and had a choice between eating starch, eating shima, eating sadza, and jollof rice, even with a South African touch. And I think that is what will make it a beautiful continent for all of us to live in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. I'm hoping that very soon you'll be making sadza and sima in Nigeria as well. I won't try to summarize what you said. We're going to have another round after the first session, after the first round. Thank you so much. I'm going to call upon now Ambassador Maria Gustava to take us through your views on the gender dimensions of Afrophobia. You have been very practically involved in the situation. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Moderator. Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It is a great honor for me to have this opportunity to address this important dialogue on the issue of profound regional and global importance, the gender dimension of xenophobia and Afrophobia. Conflict, political instability, climate change, economic inequalities, poverty, and the growing youth population are contributing to an increase in the number of vulnerable immigrants globally, particularly across the African continent. According to the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, the stock of international migrants originated from Africa is estimated at approximately 40.5 million people, of whom about 52% remain within the continent. The number of African women migrating has also increased significantly. In South Africa, women are estimated to comprise approximately 44% of the total migrant population. Amid the current migration challenges in South Africa, there has been a concerned rise in intolerance and hostility towards migrants in many communities. This is largely driven by narratives that undocumented migrants are flooding into the country, taking jobs, committing crimes, and placing pressure on public services. Such narratives are fueling xenophobia and undermining the values of African unity, solidarity, and human dignity. This growing phenomena, often referred as Afrophobia, is fundamentally at odds with the principles upon which the African Union, the Southern African Development Community were founded. Its weakness, regional integration, erodes social cohesion, and contradicts the ideals of Pan-Africanism, which promote unity, shared prosperity, and free movement of people across the continent. These acts of intolerance disproportionately affect women and girls. Migrant women often face multiple and intersecting forms of discrimination based on their nationality, gender, race, and economic status. They are particularly vulnerable to gender-based violence, exploitation, trafficking, harassment, and limited access to healthcare, education, legal protection, and decent employment. During the outbreaks of violence, women are at a great risk of sexual and gender-balanced violence, displacement, economic exclusion, and psychological traumas. Many are informal traders and primary caregivers whose livelihoods and family security are severely affected by attacks and displacement. I recall the deeply distressed case of a Mozambican woman in the advanced stage of pregnancy who was forced to flee her residence in Brits. Despite her condition, she was transported by the police to the premises of the High Commission. Shortly after arriving, she went into labor and gave birth in bathroom of the diplomatic mission before medical assistance could be arranged. No woman should ever have to endure such an inhuman experience. Likewise, children were exposed to extremely cold and difficult condition. In Durban, another woman, the owner of a beauty salon, built through years of hard work, faced threats and intimidation, demanding that she gives up her salon to another South African. Faced with the prospect of losing everything, she made the desperate decision to destroy her own business rather than surrender to those seeking to seize the fruits of her labor. These are not isolated incidents. Hundreds of Mozambican women have been evacuated after suffering verbal abuse, intimidation, threats to their physical safety, and degrading treatment. They were humiliated by derogatory terms such as makwerekwere, and many lost their homes, property, and livelihood. These experiences leave profound scars, particularly physically ones and psychological ones as well. They violate human dignity and deeply affect citizens who have always regarded South Africa as a citizen nation. In many of these incidents of violence, some of the most visible perpetrators of hostility against other women have regrettably been women themselves. Reports rarely mention this gender dimension. Therefore, a gender-centered response is not optional, it's essential. A gender-responsive approach requires, among others, ensuring protection mechanisms specifically designed for migrant women, recognizing the differences, ways in which women, men, girls, and boys experiences Afrophobia. Strengthening the mechanism to prevent and respond to gender gender-based violence during episodes of xenophobic and Afrophobic violence, supporting the economic empowerment of migrant women whose business and livelihood are often the first to suffer during the period of unrest. Improving the data collection by disaggregating information by sex, age, nationality, and other relevant factors to inform evidence-based policy response. It is precisely for this reason that the role of women in peace building is indispensable. Women possess capacity to influence behavior. They can play a decisive role by promoting campaigns of peaceful coexistence, fostering a culture of tolerance, publicly denounce hate speech and acts of violence, and mediating conflict within community. Women have the power to transform community because they are often the first educators for peace. As we reflect on practical solutions, let us ensure that the voice and experience of women and girls are not afterthought, but are placed at the center of our policies, programs, and partnership. Only through gender-responsive and human rights-based approach can we effectively combat Afrophobia and realize the aspiration of an integrated, peaceful, and prosperous Africa. Equally important is the need to challenge harmful stereotypes and misinformation that fuel hatred and division. Government, civil society, faith-based organizations, the media, traditional leaders, and education institutions all have a role in promoting tolerance, social inclusion, respect for diversity. Our young people must be educated in the value of Pan-African solidarity and peaceful coexistence. Education and public awareness are really important. We must cultivate a culture of tolerance, respect that celebrates our shared African identity. Distinguished participants, Mozambique and South Africa share not only a common border, but also a long history of solidarity, cooperation, mutual support, and the struggle for freedom and development. Our peoples have crossed borders for generations in pursuit of safety, employment, education, trade, and family reunification. Migration has always been an integral part of our shared history and should be recognized as a source of cultural enrichment and economic opportunity rather than division. Mozambique remains committed to work closely with South Africa and all regional partners to advance gender equality, protect the rights of migrants and refugees, and strengthen regional integration. Mozambique also fully recognizes the sovereign right of the Republic of South Africa to implement and enforce its immigration laws. Our shared future depends on the ability to build inclusive societies where diversity is embraced and every individual is treated with dignity and respect. Let us reaffirm our commitment to the principle of Ubuntu, our shared humanity, and to the vision of an Africa where no woman, man, or child lives in fear because of their nationality or migration status. I thank you very much for your kind attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Excellency. We are aware that you are in a rush to leave. We have received your statement, your intervention, and we're going to be sharing it with all participants. But we look forward to engaging you further on the issues that you raise in your intervention. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I thank you for the opportunity. So I'm looking forward to continue with this interaction. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. For those that have just joined us, you're welcome. From the diplomatic field in Pretoria and beyond, you are welcome, and we look forward to engaging you. We now move on to our third speaker or panelist. That's Jenna-Lee, who is going to be talking about media misinformation and the rise of AI in South Africa, the case of June 30. Jenna, please take us through your intervention. Thanks.
Wonderful. Can you see my presentation?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. It's a great honor to be here today with so many highly esteemed speakers and to follow on from all the incredible insights that have already been shared. So there is really a great need to address the mis and disinformation that's mobilizing. As the first speaker said, there's many South Africans that are in excruciating pain because of exclusion and have very real grievances. And this disinformation network is a coordinated attempt to mobilize those very real grievances for political and geopolitical gain. So I'm going to share a little bit more about that. And just for a background to the work, two of the leaders of this work and Tales of Turning are Jeffrey Mamputa and Stefan Snell, who are very experienced conflict mediators. They were part of the anti-apartheid movement, the peace accord, our transition to democracy, and have continued to do conflict mediation in gang wars and taxi wars. And so all of this is to really say that at the heart of the work we're doing is a deep understanding of people. This is combined with my background in psychology and peace building and narrative therapy. So we take this deep understanding of people and this human-centered approach and combine it with technology and social media. This is so we can do this peace building work at scale. And it is also because we know how much time people are spending on social media, and that social media is being used to manipulate our narratives and being used to manipulate our stories and who we are. We are living in a time with a global information ecosystem, and mis and disinformation is being used to erode trust in elections, suppress votes, cause extreme polarization, undermine public health, fuel offline violence, and silence marginalized voices. So a very real example of this is the xenophobia that is currently happening in South Africa. So what we did is we took social media listening tools that pull all the data from public social media. And this, we work in all the language contexts in South Africa, and we also work across Africa in the different language contexts. So from this, we can really see the nuances of the conversation. How are people talking about these issues? How are they feeling about them? What are entry points for dialogue? From this, we can also build early warning systems that show us when there's spikes of mis and disinformation, of hate speech, where there's geographical hotspots of mis and disinformation and hate speech. And it also provides early warning signs that there is going to be offline violence. And it's also really useful because we can see how the narrative shifts over time. We analyzed all the data that we pulled in relation to anti-foreign national sentiment in South Africa. And one of the key findings that rise in anger was a key indicator for offline violence. So as you can see on the graph, in the lead up to the 30th of June protests, there was a huge spike in anger. So this is very useful for the early warning system. We also looked at the markers of dangerous speech, and there was a high rate and a steep increase of hate speech and inflammatory rhetoric in the lead up to the 30th of June protests. There was then a dip, which could have been because of government warnings and calming of the rhetoric in certain organizations. However, the threats to individuals steadily declined in the lead up and on the day of the protest. So these are also really useful key indicators in the early warning system. Also, that was very significant in our analysis was that there was, you can see the green on the graph is positive sentiment and positive content about foreign nationals. So there was very little positive content about foreign nationals and it stayed constant. Whereas the red on the graph shows the negative content and sentiment towards foreign nationals and how this spiked and increased rapidly in the lead up to the 30th of June protests. And what this report suggests is had there been more positive content that was amplified, it could have shifted the situation. And you'll see why that's so important when I go into our intervention. When we were analyzing all the data, there were many signs of coordinated disinformation. So we did a network analysis on all the data, and we found that 27% of the online conversation was from disruptor and bot accounts. So 27% was coordinated. And then 64% was the general public. So what the report suggests is had that 27% of the coordinated conversation not been there, the conversation would have looked very different because that 20% is drawing in the general public to this very toxic conversation. And this is a part of the analysis that is very interesting to me. So on the screen, you can see clusters of the coordinated network. So these clusters are groups of accounts that are seeding the mis and disinformation. And then the other accounts are helping to spread and amplify it. And the gray lines are how all these clusters are interconnected and we're sharing the mis and disinformation that they're seeing. So it really shows how coordinated this conversation is. Of also of particular interest is on the right, that orange cluster is international accounts of international movements, personalities, and white supremacist accounts. And you can see how that disinformation network that's seeding mis and disinformation and amplifying it is connected through the gray lines to spreading that content, that harmful content, and is connected to the South African disinformation network. So it shows you the level of coordination that's happening. Once we analyze all this data, we share it widely. There are so many incredible organizations, as we all know, doing amazing work on the ground. So we really disseminate the findings as widely as possible and the data, because it can be also really useful for on-the-ground interventions. Then we also have our own intervention. So we have a three-prong approach that we've been doing in the xenophobia conversation. The first is calming the conversation. The next is deepening the conversation, and the third is amplifying the positive. So this is really what we can do to take action. When it comes to calming the conversation, we've developed a methodology called social truth queries. And this is going online, and when you come across disinformation, asking a question like, is this true? Where did you get this information from? Are you for real? And we've done 3 studies with the University of Washington that shows that this reduces the spread of mis and disinformation by up to 82%. So as you can see on the graph, it helps calm the conversation. So the blue is the control group where the social truth queries the blue is where the social truth queries have been applied, and the gray is the control group. So you can see how it prevents people from resharing disinformation, trusting it, and believing in its accuracy. We all know that disinformation is designed to make people angry and afraid. So when people are angry and afraid, it's very hard to have the very real conversations that we need to have about the genuine grievances and the exclusion that people are facing. So that's why we first calm the conversation, And the next is to deepen the conversation. So we've taken all the conflict mediation and in-person dialogue skills and adapted it to online. So we ask people curious questions. We try understand their perspective and get them to really share in an empathetic and non-judgmental way. And then we ask them questions that get them to reflect on harmful beliefs. And because this has been so successful, we've been training peer educators, community-based organizations, university students in this methodology so we can do it at scale. And then we've also combined it with AI. So the AI identifies the disinformation. It's trained on our methodology to suggest a response. It classifies the disinformation, and then a trained digital dialogue facilitator decides whether to post that response or not, or if it needs to be edited. The third part of the methodology is amplifying the positive. So we really we take the data and we work with communities. We know that communities are on the forefront of this and that they are the experts of the solution. So we work with the data and communities to co-create positive content about foreign nationals. And then we create unbranded social media content, a toolkit with social media posts that civil society can use and community-based organizations can use to amplify the positive online. These are some examples. So from the network analysis, we realized that many civil society organizations were really aware of the level of manipulation that's going on, but perhaps that everyday South Africans aren't, or the general public aren't really realizing that their grievances are being manipulated in a way that's not going to benefit them. It's only going to benefit the people that are behind the coordinated disinformation. So we created a whole series of unbranded designs that our digital dialogue facilitators that we've trained can use to engage online and to make people conscious that they're actually consuming disinformation that is going to be no benefit to them at all. So for the sake of time, I'm going to stop here, but this is a brief overview of how we are tackling this very coordinated disinformation that is designed to create offline violence, civil unrest, and undermine our elections.
Thank you so much, Jenna. We are going to be asking for your presentation at a later stage so that we can share it with colleagues, but also we're going to engage in a discussion where some colleagues may have questions for you. Our next intervention is from Faatima, and she's going to be talking about South Africa belongs to all who live in it, human rights, rule of law, and accountability. Over to you, Faatima.
Good afternoon, everyone. Her Excellencies, all protocol observed, and to everyone online. I'm going to share my screen, but I'm also going to turn off my camera if it's okay while I'm presenting, just because my laptop somehow can't do both.
Please go ahead.
Okay. Is everyone able to see my screen?
I can see it.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me today. Just going to, perfect. Okay, so South Africa belongs to all who live in it. This is a direct quote from the 1955 Freedom Charter, drafted at a moment when the very idea of universal belonging in this country was still a demand, not a description. It did not disappear into history, and it was carried forward with the basic word for word into the preamble of our 1996 Constitution. And you'd see that I put it on the screen on the right-hand side as well. And in the preamble of our Constitution, it states that we, the people of South Africa, believe that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, united in our diversity. The Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. So I'm not going to go into everything just for time's sake, but I just want to emphasize that the Constitution operationalizes the preamble's commitment through the Bill of Rights. And it is worth being precise about the language because the drafters were precise. And in that preciseness, they did not indicate that every citizen, but rather that everyone is equal before the law. And they've awarded everyone in this country various rights in terms of the Bill of Rights, such as dignity, education, the right to access healthcare services, reproductive healthcare, sufficient food and water, social security, as well as the right to basic education. Okay, I'm going to move on to domestic law. So the Constitution sets the floor, but legislation is supposed to build on it. So South Africa gives effect to these obligations through the Refugees Act. Section 2 of the Act codifies the principle of non-refoulement, which I will go into later. Section 3 of the Refugees Act defines who qualifies as a refugee, and it is a direct hybrid of the two international instruments, the UN Convention's persecution-based definition, as well as the OAU, which is the Organization of African Unities Convention governing the specific aspects of refugee problems in South Africa. Section 3C extends refugee status to a spouse or dependent of someone who qualifies under Section A or B. And the Act also entrenches non-penalization for irregular entry by asylum seekers. This means that arriving without papers is not in itself supposed to be treated as a crime. If you fail under the Refugees Act, you are then governed by the Immigration Act. And the Immigration Act 13 of 2002 basically governs everyone else. So those who don't fall under the refugee framework. This is where things get a little harder because Section 30 of the Act allows the department to declare a foreign national an undesirable person for reasons ranging from prior deportation to certain criminal convictions to simply having an overstayed visa. So once declared undesirable, a person is barred from re-entering South Africa for a period ranging between 12 months to 5 years, depending on the length of overstay. And then we look at the Prevention and Combating of Hate Crimes and Hate Speech Act. The first South African statute, this act was the first South African statute to criminalize hate crimes and hate speech on grounds that explicitly exclude, that explicitly include nationality, ethnicity, migrants, refugee, or asylum seeker status. And this is directly relevant to how we name and how we prosecute Afrophobic conduct. Looking at the UN conventions and its limits, I want to speak about its history because it tells you something that's very important that doesn't fit our reality. So the starting point of modern refugee law is the 1951 UN Convention relating to the status of refugees. It was later extended to the 1967 Protocol, and it defines a refugee narrowly as someone with a well-founded fear of persecution on grounds of race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership of a particular social group. That definition was built for a mid-century European context where there was individualized persecution. So one person fleeing one regime. Whereas African states, while negotiating decolonization and living through mass displacement from liberation wars, border conflicts, and colonial partition violence, found this definition too narrow. They found that displacement on the continent was really about one person being individually targeted, but rather about an entire population's fleeing war, foreign domination, or, for example, events disrupting public order in all or part of their country. This is why the OAU adopted the convention governing the specific areas of refugee problems in South Africa, entering into force in, I think, 1947. It kept the UN Convention's grounds, but it added this broader category, the flight from external aggression, occupation, foreign domination, or events seriously disturbing public order. It also added protection grounds absent from the 1951 Convention, prohibiting discrimination based on nationality or political opinion in the treatment of refugees. It builds in state responsibility sharing, the voluntary nature of repatriation, and prohibition on non-refoulement. Basically, in short, the OAU Convention was Africa telling the international community that the UN framework, while necessary, was not sufficient for African displacement realities. That history matters for this talk because it tells us that our region has, since before our own democracy even existed, already recognized that displacement here looks different and built the law to match that. So the gap that we are discussing today is not a gap in the law, but a gap in the implementation for the most part. The African Charter on Human and People's Rights. So this was the Banjul Charter that sits alongside the convention, and it protects freedom of movement and the right to seek asylum. I'm gonna skip through just for time's sake and move a little bit more quickly. So the principle of non-refoulement. If there was one principle I would leave you holding on to, it's this one. Simply because non-refoulement is the prohibition on returning anyone to a country where they face persecution, torture, or any serious threat to life. It is in Article 33 of the Convention, the 1951 Convention, and it is also echoed in the OAU Convention. And it's reinforced by Article 3 of the UN Convention Against Torture. And it is widely also regarded as customary international law. And what this principle does is it's binding on states even who haven't ratified the specific treaties, because it is considered a baseline norm of the international legal order. This is the strongest possible legal statement you can make about a principle, and it does not depend on which treaty a country has signed. It is binding regardless. So some of the systemic challenges that we are seeing. So I've talked about the law on paper, and obviously what it looks like on the ground is vastly different. So to go very quickly into it, is refugee reception officers are running years-long application backlogs, leaving people in legal limbo. I think there's something like, there was a period where 98% of applications were rejected. And this puts people in a very precarious position. I'm going to speak a little bit about some of the realities that we have noticed on the ground. And this is from the period of after June 30. So we were doing a lot of monitoring, human rights monitoring in prison cells, in the holding cells at police stations. So we were making sure that the large amounts of immigrants who were arrested were kept under proper conditions, that they were given the correct treatment, that they weren't abused, and that they weren't overcrowding in holding cells. But obviously this was far from the reality. A holding cell in a police station should house between 18 to 20 people, but there were days when there were around over 40 people in these holding cells. There's also the fact that people need to be processed within a 48-hour time frame. And this was also not the case that we've noticed, where people were being kept much longer. And it was only when we started monitoring the logs that people were starting to be pushed out of these holding cells. we had so many people getting lost in the system, and we were unable to locate our clients on various days. We'd go to the police station, and the police station would tell us, no, our clients have been taken to court. When we get to court, even though their names are on the court roll, our clients never appeared before a judge. And when we started interrogating this, we were told that unless we don't bribe the police officers at the courts, they'll never bring our clients out. So there's such a deep level of corruption as well that must be acknowledged. And then just some of like the personal stories, because we talk a lot about the law, but there's a lot of personal stories attached to this. And there was a client of ours who was a mom who was arrested at around 9 in the morning, and her kid was still at daycare. So when we were doing the monitoring and we met her in the holding cell, she was more concerned about where is her kid, has her kid even been picked up from the daycare center, because we went the day after she was arrested. There was another case while we were at the Randburg Magistrates Court of a dad who left a baby in his shack, and he didn't know what was going to happen to the baby, if there was anyone even to look after it, as there were no other dependents. And these are the realities we are seeing on the ground. We also see the inconsistencies in South Africa. For example, when South Africa was declaring, went to the ICJ, for example, the International Criminal Court of Justice, to declare that a genocide was happening in Palestine, but then at that same moment denied Palestinians refugee status in South Africa. So those are just some of the realities that we face. Freedom of speech and its limitations, and this is something that's very important in terms of the vigilantism that we're seeing currently. So the law does not operate in a vacuum, and Afrophobic violence does not happen without Afrophobic speech preceding and accompanying it. So Section 16 of our Constitution protects freedom of expression, but the subsection 16, subsection 2, expressly excludes advocacy of hatred based on race, ethnicity, gender, religion, and that constitutes incitement to cause harm. So put simply, freedom of speech ends when it becomes incitement against the next person's rights. The Constitutional Court in the case of Oyelani settled that hate speech must be genuinely harmful. It must incite harm and promote or propagate hatred, not merely be hurtful or offensive. That is a deliberately narrow test, and it's designed to protect robust political speech while still drawing a very firm line against incitement. The Prevention and Combating of Hate Crimes and Hate Speech Act, assented to in 2024 for the first time, creates a standalone criminal offense for hate crimes and hate speech, explicitly framed around South Africa's obligations to combat racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance. A message of hate and a message of exclusion is not aligned with our Constitution, no matter who it targets. Legal accountability for incitement, including incitement against foreign nationals, is not a theoretical mechanism. So it exists, it has teeth, and it is actively being used. The challenge is to make sure that it is applied consistently to xenophobic incitement as it is to other protected grounds. Disinformation as a weapon. So this is where discourse becomes strategy. We're seeing real community grievances about healthcare access, about housing, about jobs being used to perpetuate xenophobia. Frustration that should be directed at service delivery failures gets redirected at the most vulnerable, least powerful people in the room. And the state has little incentive to correct that narrative because it removes accountability from the state's own shoulders. And if the story is that foreign nationals are overwhelming our clinics and our schools, which is obviously not the case, nobody has to ask why the clinic or the school was under-resourced to begin with. This is precisely why litigation matters more than narrative management. Cases such as, so this is cases that we as Section 27 have worked on. For example, the Cancer Alliance versus MEC for Health in Gauteng, which forced the Gauteng Government of Health to account for a devastating radiation oncology backlog. This case was about how underspending by the department led to people not receiving cancer treatment. There was no scarcity of resources, just bad administration and corruption. In the case for Center for Child Law versus Basic Education, which is an education case that Section 27 has worked on, it struck down the documentation requirements that were barring undocumented children, many of them migrant children, from schools. And this shows that the courts, not disinformation, where responsibility for service failures actually gets fixed. Both of these cases are at heart about making the state answer for its own failures instead of letting it outsource the blame to the most disempowered that it governs. What these vigilante groups are doing is using real community issues to perpetuate xenophobia. And
Hi, Faatima. Please, may I ask you to wind down?
okay,
Thanks.
no problem. Can I just have 2 more minutes if that's okay?
Okay, fine. That's
So
fine.
we can clearly see from research that Groundwork has done is that there's no evidence that immigration disproportionately commits crimes. The Department of Education has also explicitly stated that immigrants are not straining resources, as only 1.8% of learners in schools are foreign. Health departments lose more from fruitless and irregular expenditure than it costs them to service immigrants. And studies also show that if all immigrants were to leave the country today, the unemployment rate would still stay the exact same or even increase for that matter. This is something that's quite important in terms of rethinking what constitutes as a crime. So under the Immigration Act, being illegal an undocumented foreign national is a status arising from an administrative failure. For example, an expired visa, a missed renewal, an unprocessed application. It's not in itself an act our criminal law is built around. Intentional conduct causing harm to an identifiable victim assessed for culpability through a criminal justice system process with the protections that come with it. So yet these consequences attached to this administrative status is severe and they carry criminal adjacent weight. So this is something that we advocate against. It's basically and once the public discourse frames undocumented migrants as illegals in the criminal sense, it manufactures moral license for exactly the vigilante conduct we are witnessing today. Communities start to see themselves as enforcing justice against criminals when in law they are actually inflicting harm on people whose only default is a paperwork lapse subject to an administrative, not criminal process. And in closing, I want to leave you with a line that sums up everything I've said. It is, a nation is judged not by how it treats its most empowered citizens, but rather its most disempowered. We have a constitution that says South Africa belongs to all who live in it. We have domestic legislation, a regional refugee framework by African states for African realities, and a customary international law principle of non-refoulement, which binds us all regardless of what we sign. What we do not have, though, is consistently in this implementation, the institutional capacity and political will to make that framework mean something for people who need it most. And I'll end on that note. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Faatima, for that comprehensive offering on law on paper versus implementation on the ground. Thank you so much. We'll be asking for your presentation as well so that we can share with all colleagues present and not present. We now move on to our keynote speaker, who is going to take us through Pan-Africanism and regional responsibility, the push and pull factors of immigration. Over to you, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma. Please take the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much for allowing me to speak at the end. A lot of things have been said. And I greet everyone who's online and also congratulate our speakers who have done an excellent job. I think as a start, we should just acknowledge that we are all Africans. If we acknowledge that, then everything that has been said and follows would be easier. We are Africans first and foremost. And that's who we were until, colonizers came and started dividing us. But we were Africans, as the first speaker was saying. We were moving around freely on the continent. I come from a village. I'm a very rural person. I come from a village called Nkumba. And I went to Nkumba Primary School. But if there are Ugandans here, they will know and they will confirm that in Uganda there is Nkumba University, exactly the same spelling. In Rwanda there is Nkumba. In Tanzania there is also some place called Nkumba. So you can see that we are actually just one people who moved around as Africans. And that's why even our forebearers did not emphasize, even as they were forming the OU, didn't emphasize the divisions, but emphasize that we are Africans. Even before the AU or the OAU, Pan-Africanists from the continent and from the diaspora were meeting, acknowledging that we are all Africans. They had several conferences in the UK. Even in 1945, in one of their conferences in Manchester, they said Africa must be decolonized within 50 years. That was their language. Not this country, that country, that country, but they said Africa must be decolonized within 50 years. And of course, South Africa was decolonized on the 49th year. So Pan-Africanism also means that we should have free movement within the continent. Legal, but free. There is a protocol actually that has been agreed upon of free movement of people and goods. It was agreed upon in 2018. It's not being applied because not enough countries have rectified it. It only needs 15 countries to rectify for it to come into effect. And that will allow people to move freely but legally. So it also places a responsibility on every government to be able to give travel documents, legal travel documents to their citizens. Of course, people who are fleeing conflict, that's a different matter. And I think enough has been said about that, which I agree with. If you are fleeing conflict, obviously you won't have a passport to start with because you are fleeing. And there is law that governs how you then get treated in that country. So when people come to any country legally, we cannot then say they must go. Because also, even if people have to leave because they are illegal in the country, it's not for me and you to just go around stopping people in the street. You can't correct something that you say is illegal by acting illegally yourself. Because it's only the police and immigration people from Home Affairs who have a right to stop people, ask them for their documentation, and then determine their status and whether they should go or stay. It's not citizens who should be doing that. It's not legal, really, for citizens to do that. But the government must also take its responsibility to ensure that the law is enforced by the law enforcement, not by citizens. And also, I hear citizens complaining about unemployment, about this and that. But I think they are not looking at the real problem. A lot of Africans have left South Africa. Has unemployment decreased? Probably it has increased. Because also in South Africa, our tourists, the vast majority of our tourists come from the continent. They don't come from Europe or America. Or more than 70% come from the continent. Can you imagine if they decided we are no longer going to South Africa? What's going to happen? And maybe, as just another example, our water here in Gauteng comes from Lesotho. So it just shows that we ourselves are not independent of the continent. So it's important to recognize that we are really all Africans. And we need to work together. But I think also the heads of state must look at this matter, because if some of the things that have been agreed upon were implemented, we wouldn't have some of these problems. Like I said, there's a protocol on free movement of people and goods. There is also African free trade agreement that is being implemented, but it's slow. And also the Pan-African payment system. Not many countries have joined it. And all those things would also improve our trade and improve the way we trade and how our economy can grow better and faster. But also, I think as Africans, we should realize that we are a rich continent, but with poor Africans. So we need to reverse that protocol. How can you have a paradox like that when the continent is rich, but the Africans who live in it are poor? And if we were paying sufficient attention to that, I don't think we would be having all the problems we're having. Because if we utilized the resources of the continent for the prosperity of the continent and prosperity of the people who live in it, then we wouldn't have a lot of problems that we are facing now. Because even in South Africa, it's the poverty unemployment that is making people scapegoat Africans as the cause, which is not the cause. The cause is the way we are dealing with our economy, we are dealing with our resources. But also even in the other parts of Africa, if we're all doing the same, people wouldn't be crossing the Sahel and the Mediterranean, some dying in the Mediterranean, trying to find greener pastures in Europe. So let's pay attention to how we deal with our continent, how we deal with our resources. Let's take charge of our resources and stop exporting jobs every day. If you take something from the mine to the port, we are exporting jobs. We are also exporting revenue because we are selling that cheap. By the time it comes back as a finished good, probably you won't afford it. If you do afford it, you will be paying much, much more than you sold. So all of us, let's get our governments, our business to do the right things in terms of our resources. Then Africa would actually be probably, at the moment, we don't know, but we are the biggest donor because we sell things cheaply, raw material, and people then create jobs where these materials come and then they sell expensively. I think Africa must wake up. We also have sufficient land to grow food and to feed ourselves and probably help feed the world. There's no need for us to be spending billions of dollars importing food. We have land, we have sunshine, we have water, we have people. And also we must remember what Sankara said, that who feeds you controls you. So we must feed ourselves so that nobody controls us through feeding us. So I think we should pay attention, all of us, more attention to our economy, but also skills revolution. We must skill all our young people. No young person should leave education without a skill. Because if you are without a skill, you may be educated but not be able to get a job. But if you are skilled, you can get a job or you can create jobs yourselves. So it's important to also ensure that we have a skills revolution. And the skills revolution should be for everyone, for young men, young women, everyone. So I think, yes, there is this Afrophobic thing, which is actually alien to South Africa, if you think of it. If our ancestors were to wake up today, they wouldn't recognize this country because they themselves saw themselves as Africans. That's why we have a national anthem that says, God, that we bless Africa, not South Africa. Nkosi Sikelel' Africa is our anthem. Even the organization that freed this country is not called South Africa. It's called African National Congress. And even at the time, they were saying Maibuyi Africa. They were not saying Maibuyi South Africa. It was Maibuyi Africa because they recognized that we are part and parcel of Africa. And let me say something maybe that I hope we can discuss. Is this just Afrophobia? Or is it something more serious against South Africa? Is it not something that is geared at isolating South Africa? Is it not part, in my view, I think this Afrophobia and the white genocide are two sides of the same coin. It's something actually against South Africa to isolate South Africa from the continent. And who is pushing it? Who's funding all these marches and all these T-shirts and everything? Who's the funder? So I think we must look at this in a much more serious way, in a much broader way, instead of just looking at it as some outburst of Afrophobia. I think it's a bigger agenda to isolate South Africa. But it may also be a bigger agenda against Africa. Do you remember that one of the presidents of a superpower said Africa needs to be recolonized? And if you want to recolonize Africa, where best to start than where colonizers never left? But that's my view. You can disagree with it. But I think, yes, the grievances that people are complaining about, as I conclude, are genuine. There is unemployment, there is crime, but I think, as I've said before, they are barking at a wrong tree. It's not the Africans that are the cause of unemployment in South Africa. It's not the Africans that are the cause of crime. Yes, I'm not saying they're angels. There may be some who do crime just like South Africans. There are South Africans who do crime. But also, do you think somebody can come from Nigeria, arrive here, and start selling drugs without conniving with some South Africans working with them? I don't think so. So I think we need to look at this very broadly, because if we don't look at it broadly, we will not find the solution to the problems, because Africans can leave South Africa, but unemployment will remain as it's still remaining. I was in Durban. I just drove this morning to Johannesburg. There are some Uber people who were complaining that their Ubers are not getting the same business. And it's probably because Africans who are normal tourists are still watching to see what's happening in South Africa and are not coming in their numbers as they normally do. And crime, there is still crime. So I think the solution should be government should do what it needs to do so that citizens don't have to be the ones that fish out people who are illegal. But also it's wrong to say Africans must go, even those who are here legally. It is wrong. Those who are here legally are here legally. They must stay. We must also remember that I think it was around 1996 when President Mandela then said Africans from the continent who have been in South Africa for more than 10 years or more, must be given citizenship. Because the law then during apartheid was giving other, especially people from Europe, citizenship after they've been here for 10 years, but they were not doing the same for Africans who have been here for 10 years or more. And President Mandela said they must be nationalized. And there were those who came through to show that they were here for more than 10 years, were given citizenship. So, and the wealth of this country was not only built through the hands of South Africans. The wealth of this country has been built by a lot of Africans from other countries. Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Malawi, many, Lesotho, Swaziland, they came, some of them worked in the mines, some of them worked on the farm, some of them worked in other areas. So they also built the wealth of this country, if we're being honest amongst ourselves. So maybe I shouldn't take too much time, but to say, for me, this is a broader, if we don't curb it early, we can be in serious trouble. We must make sure we contain it. We must make sure that as Africans, we take charge of our continent, take charge of our resources, and also conflicts. You know, if we look at the conflicts on our continent, they are about resources at the end of the day. Whether it's in Sudan, whether it's in DRC, at the end of the day, it's about the natural resources. So let's work together. Let's take charge of our resources. Let's use our resources to eradicate poverty and have prosperity. And we must also remember that if we don't develop our countries, we can't sustain peace. Because now that I'm speaking English, I must say, the English say a hungry man is an angry man. They don't say anything about women. So if a hungry man is an angry man, you can see that there will be no peace if people remain poor and hungry. So we must develop so that people are not angry and hungry. And we must try, where there is conflict, we must try and deal with it, but deal with it and develop the country. So, and development must be driven by everybody, men, youth, and women, because you can't use half your talent and think you'll reach your full potential. Every talent needs to be engaged in developing our continent. And if we really did develop our continent, we can be one of the most powerful continents, not in terms of military, but economic and otherwise. Maybe I should end there. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma. You have left us with 3 questions on the table. Is this just Afrophobia, or it is something against South Africa? Or more broadly, is it something against Africa? And of course, the world development agenda and governance, which needs to be addressed. We have now reached the end of our presentations. Thanks to all our esteemed panelists. We now open for discussion. And I am going to put a few people on the spot while we wait for hands. They can choose to take the spot or not. I will start with Ambassador Nhlapo, if you're still around, if you need to say anything. Dr. Rabab, if you're still here and you need to say something. And the ambassador from Singapore, Ambassador Mantaha, if you would like to take the floor is open. Otherwise, please raise your hands if you have a comment or an input or a question to our panelists or to all of us in general. It's now open for discussion.
Helsinki, can I go?
Yes, please go.
Now that you decided to put me on the spot, let me just respond quickly. Thank you for getting this together, and for the panelists, a good choice of panelists who have dealt with the challenge that we want to engage from all possible angles that needed to be tackled. And I think the three questions that you ended up with.
Brilliant.
The three
Jeez,
questions
it
that
was
you
so
ended
good.
up with
And we're going to see
are
that
the
we use it
ones
all
that
over.
we will
Okay.
have to answer and answer faithfully
Can
and
everybody
truthfully.
else?
I hope this will inform the discussions that are going to be taking place at the level of the AU. If we adopt this approach and answer the questions that have been posed by everybody, and particularly the three that Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma posed, I think we'll be getting closer to addressing the problem for what it is and coming up with solutions that will save this continent, because I also believe it is this continent that is under attack. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Thank you. Any other hand? Mujangu?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much to the panelists for a very, very detailed and different and raising different perspectives of this on this issue. I have a question, maybe two. One question, one observation. I think first of all, South Africa has had problems in the past, and I've raised this before, that like where there's a problem that some of our African brothers and sisters and leaders think we could have handled differently, their first response was always to come through, just to come and say, can we talk and solve this? I think Minister Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma would remember after the Buipato massacre, there was a massacre in South Africa, for those who don't know, during the talks for transition. President Mandela walked out and left the talks because he was so upset with what the Boers were doing while negotiating and killing other people. What President Nyerere did, because President Nyerere was sitting in Tanzania and thought this is really a wrong move. He just came, he flew over and said quietly to say to Madiba, I think that's a wrong move. You know, these Boers have seen you've opened a flank that they've seen. They will continue to kill, 1 there, 10 there, 20 there, and you'll never get your freedom. Go back to the table and go and talk. Now, and Madiba had to come down and go back to the table and talk. I'm using that example to say where there have been problems in the past, and there are many. I'm just picking one from Mwalimu Nyerere. There have been difficult talks that are held to say, maybe we don't agree with you, do it this way. This time, all of us read the responses of our leaders on social media, on TV, and everything. The instinct was not to say South Africa is one of us. Let's just go down and find out what is happening. The instinct was to condemn, even from Tanzania. I can say directly here that a country that I least expected to respond in the manner that it did. So what I'm asking is why from our leaders and our panelists, why do you think that the response from African leaders is different from the one that we would have expected. The second one, very quick one, Espina, is that I think Prof. Bayo Olukoshi spoke about the political management of the differences in Nigeria. You know, when Nigeria had differences with Ghana and Ghana had differences with Nigeria, that the matter was handled differently politically. I don't know if he's still on the line, but I would like to ask that he compares that perhaps with how South Africa handled these so-called, maybe not use provocative language, these ructions that came up. How do you think they perhaps handle them properly or not properly, having regard to what happened in the past with Ghana must go and Nigeria must go? Thank you.
Thank you. Priscilla? Priscilla?
Thank you. Good evening to our panelists and our director of the program. I would like to thank the organizers of the program for aiding me. I'm not sure where my name was picked from, but this discussion was quite fruitful. I really want to thank the panelists for laying down mostly the legal framework concerning the regulation of African affairs. But also I think there's another dimension that has been, being talked about, that has been having a really immense conversation about this issue of Afrophobic, which is quite unfortunate, affecting most of our fellow Africans. So the main argument is that South Africa, although now I'm hearing that it is also suffering, it's very unfortunate, but it has been discussed that South Africa has been using their fellow Africans to be like a way of political campaigns. Like as when there is always an election, they want to portray like as if they prefer their fellow nationalities over every other national to gain their votes. So I just want to hear comments from the panelists. How far true is this theory that South Africa is politicians particularly is using this kind of march Afrophobic just to sell their political agendas to their electorate come elections? Because remember, this year in South Africa there's an election that is going to happen, and even last year when there was elections, there was also some form of xenophobic or actually Afrophobic attacks, and this has been happening. And also the other theory is that is the politicians fighting against themselves. And this has made Africans suffer. In which way? That when one politician in South Africa wants to denounce another one in South Africa, they would stage and fund this much, so that they lose international support, regional support, and at the end of the day, even the economy is going to be affected. Because in any case, if South Africa does not want foreign nationals, isn't there another legal way, a noble way, a silent way of dealing with it? Because already people are supposed to be having visas and they pass through borders to inspect those visas. What's lacking there? What's the missing link that you end up having people without visas, without documentation, and everyone else now, every South African national now is saying we are fighting against undocumented foreigners. So those are the main, contentions that I have, and I hope the panelists will be able to to address them. But actually, thank you again for involving me in this discussion. I've really learned a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Priscilla. We go to Lolo, then we take it to the panelists to answer the questions that have been raised. Lolo?
Thank you so much, Mahesfina, and good afternoon or evening to everybody. Thank you so much to the panelists for such a rich discussion. As a younger advocate, human rights advocate, I was sitting here clocking it throughout the discussions that have been happening here today. And it's a very crucial time to also have this discussion collectively as Africans. And I think first of all is to really apologize, you know, as a South African and as an African child, to our fellow African brothers and sisters for, you know, what has been happening and what they've had to go through in our country. I don't believe that xenophobia and Afrophobia is who we are. I think we are greater than this, not only as South Africans, but as Africans as well. And for me, it's also a matter of the fact that Afrophobia and xenophobia and all of these things, considering the time that we are in right now, geopolitically, and also moving to Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma's comments around it, it's a bigger thing around isolating South Africa and dividing Africa through isolating South Africa. I think those are very important, difficult questions that we have to unpack and discuss. However, I feel that this is also an agenda of pulling us away from what should be a defining moment for Africans, considering the time that we are in. Instead of chasing our fellow African brothers and sisters away and playing into the old divide and conquer script, because that's what I see this as. We should be mobilizing one another to build a Pan-African Citizens Coalition that holds our leaders accountable. Because yes, people are...
Interrupt, Lolo. Are you able to put on your camera so we can see who we are engaged with? If you're able
I look very bad, sorry.
Okay, no problem.
I would have loved to, my apologies.
Okay, no problem, please go ahead.
Yes, and so it's not just, you know, the anger of South Africans and fellow Africans is valid because we are going through the most, right? However, it's not the ordinary African people, the ordinary citizens who create economic and structural and systematic collapses in our countries. The responsibility lies with those entrusted by us with political leadership who have failed or who have not fulfilled the promise to govern in the interest of the people. And therefore the anger is misdirected. And I feel like this was a missed opportunity in South Africa, in Africa, for us to drive an agenda towards unity than greater division. And how do we unite as citizens? If we tell Malawans go home, let's build a network of citizens and inform each other. You know, we used to have political schools before 1994 and a little bit after 1994, where we educated and informed each other of what is happening, and we knew what was happening in Zimbabwe, in Mozambique, and so forth. And we need to get to invest into those kinds of things and see how do we build our countries and our nations again. But above all, Africa is the way it is because there is no accountability. And as people, instead of dividing each other because we are fighting the wrong enemy here, and we are not enemies, we need to find ways and be strategic in how do we unite and find ways to hold our leaders accountable, but also steer the ship in a direction where we build each other's nation in order for us to, if we build Southern Africa, East Africa, South Africa, North Africa, we then build Africa, and it requires all of us to put in the work. And yes, thank you so much. That was my contribution.
Thank you very much. We go back to the panel. We'll come back for a second round of comments and questions. For now, we go to the panel. I will start with Prof. Adebayo.
Okay, thank you very much. Those are very useful comments, and I also thank the panelists for their contribution. I mean, I couldn't agree more with Dr. Dlamini-Zuma that perhaps this is also a wake-up call to all of us to work harder towards the good free movement of people on the African continent. You know, I did mention that there's migration and there's mobility. And a great number of people simply want to be mobile and not necessarily to migrate. They say that there's no place that is sweeter than home, especially if it is not a forced migration. And I hope that we will achieve that freedom of movement of people on our continent before too long. Nigeria and Ghana, they are like Siamese twins, actually. Pretty much like South Africa, Mozambique, or South Africa, Lesotho. And when the matches started, the most recent matches started in Ghana, Nigeria must go. Over the decision of some Nigerian migrants in Ghana to enthrone a chief of their own, of all places, Ashanti-land. It actually took the direct intervention of the president and the ministers. It didn't even involve Nigeria sending anybody to express any concern or anything. It was left to the Ghanaian government to quench the fire that was lighting up. And I think I can understand why there was a moment of anger in Ghana, but it was going to subside on account of the many interdependencies that tie the two countries and peoples together. You may not know it, but President John Mahama grew up in Nigeria as an adopted Nigerian mother, holds a Nigerian chieftaincy title. And if all is to be said and done, he can actually stand election in Nigeria as well as in Ghana. So it's that symbiotic relationship that also moderates a lot of the exchanges, and sometimes it can be very competitive between the two countries. Very competitive, especially when it is jollof rice and football. But otherwise, people privilege dialogue over every other thing. And there's a recognition that the number of Nigerian formal sector businesses that are established in Ghana, if they were to pull out of the country, it will certainly cause a tremor, if not an earthquake, in the Ghanaian economy, whether from the banking and insurance sector to the real estate sector and others. So citizens can express their displeasure and do so peacefully, but at the end of the day, politicians must lead society. Politicians must lead society, and that is what I think I have found a little wanting in the most recent case of Afrophobia, in which it was only a matter of degrees to distinguish between extremist ministers and more moderate officials, but basically not willing to stick their neck out to say this is totally unacceptable. This is totally unacceptable. Because as Nkosazana said, we are all Africans. And it's not the first time it has been said, but it's almost like it's water on the feather of a duck. President Mbeki, we remember his speech, I am an African, the whole philosophy of Ubuntu. And also, it's important that political education should be given some priority attention as we go forward, whilst also making it clear that violence on anybody, whether legal or illegal, will be met with the maximum sanctions allowed by the law. I think I agree with the view that in general, even if you were to evacuate all the foreigners in all our different countries, you are not going to achieve the kind of structural change that we are yearning for. That structural change can only come from visionary leadership. If you have leadership that is mired in governance challenges of all kinds, and obviously, I think we are going to be faced with a situation in which people don't have confidence anymore in the ability of the politicians to lead society, and they will take laws into their hands. And that is what I think exactly was happening in this particular case. Sis Mojanko, I hope I answered your question.
Mojango? Okay, Jenna-Lee?
Thank you so much for all the great questions and answers, and to all the incredible insights all the speakers shared. I also learned a lot from this, and also from the reflections that people brought. So I really think this is an attack on South Africa and Africa, and it's very coordinated disinformation, and it's very geopolitical. So I agree with what everyone's saying, this need to stick together, and this need to stop the colonization that has continued to extract Africa's resources. The more division there is, the more resources can be extracted. And this is the real reason why we have, well, one of the very real reasons why we have such high unemployment, when we have such talent in South Africa and Africa. At Tales of Turning, we work with young leaders across Africa, and the talent they have is extraordinary. So it really is this these geopolitical plays that are in the lead up to the elections. And of course, we know we're also in a geopolitical sensitive place where there are attempts to get South Africa to align with different countries for various reasons. So I think it's really important to look at it in that it is something really, really serious, as well as the harm. We've heard from a lot of the speakers, the very severe on-the-ground harm that it's causing against human lives and children and men. And I think the other thing is what the first speaker started with is this, he used the words excruciating, which really stood out for me.
Please, if you can mute our mics if we're not on the floor. Thank you, colleagues.
The really excruciating pain of exclusion that South Africans are facing. So as well, it's as well as addressing the disinformation and this attack on South Africa and Africa, we also need to be listening and addressing the grievances of South Africans, which have nothing to do with foreign nationals and have everything to do with unemployment and exclusion, and how excruciating it is. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Faatima? Faatima, are you around?
Yes, I am. Thank you so much. And thanks to the speakers as well, to everyone for their comments. I agree with what everyone has said. My only addition is that I wanted to speak about, I think it was Mahmoud Mamdani in one of his previous works, in which he speaks about South Africa and the Bantu education that was practiced in South Africa at the time of apartheid, was then carried out into institutions after that. So in all sectors such as health, law, it was far beyond just the education space. It traveled into all different sectors, for example. And I think that is what we're seeing. So even though we are democratized society, our institutions aren't democratized. And I think that is something that still plays a role today, and in a lot of the violence that we're still seeing, because our institutions don't serve us. It doesn't serve the people. And I think that is something that we need to work to correct as well going forward. But thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. I want to ask Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma now, given a very pertinent and still remaining questions, which I think we need to carry forward in the next round of questions and answers. We'll go now to Singwa. Dennis?
Yes, thank you so much.
Please go ahead.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry for my voice. I'm really happy for these beautiful voices. Hearing, I'm one of the affected communities.
Can you get closer to the mic a bit?
Yes, can you hear me now?
You're not very clear. Maybe if you can remove the earphones.
Is it better now?
Yeah, it's better. It's better.
Okay. Yeah. I was saying that I'm happy for the voices that I had here. I'm from the refugee communities that are mostly affected. You know, Africa is troubled by different failure of leadership, dictatorship, and insecurities. And one of the affected communities is refugees communities. So when it is said that people should go back, you had many countries resorted on bringing back their citizens, but refugees, they are left. They don't have any country to come and pick them from here because they are on their own. So it's good to hear your voices here. I wish it will be go out and speak up and be in public, and yeah, because this is our continent. Refugees are here temporarily, of course. The time will come when in our countries, like the security comes back, we will go back. But temporarily, we wish to be in peace until we can be able to go back to our countries. Yes, so thank you so much. At least this clears the air that South Africa is not xenophobic. It's few elements, and we are really very thankful for everyone who speak up against the hardships that is brought up against my Africans, but especially refugees, because they don't have really much alternatives, like migrants who can maybe come here at their own will and go back as they wish. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Rabab?
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm called Rabab Baldo. I'm a Sudanese, and I'm so happy to be with you today. But at the same time, disappointed to see that South Africa has issues with African followers. South Africa has been a model for all of us in Africa to follow in democracy, in inclusivity, in managing diversity, and all those aspects. So I wonder why now we are going back to this. At the same time, my question also, how can the African Union ensure that its membership are upholding, to their obligation to protect African citizens, refugees, and migrants residing with their own territories, as all of us, we know that the EU has created a kind of a free of movement, free of integration of any African countries. And what is happening right now in South Africa, and as the previous speaker has highlighted, a similar situation is affecting Sudanese refugees in Egypt, who are facing increasingly a kind of discrimination, violence, and restrictions. So my question to the panelists, what concrete measure will the AU take to uphold its commitment to the principle of free movement, protection, and the integration of African citizens and refugees across member states? How does the AU intend to ensure that these principles are respected in practice, particularly by the member states? And in the situation of the refugees, if it's you are a work or labor migrant, it's different from a refugee that he or she was forced to leave their beloved country to be a refugee in another country. The conflict and the war that happening in our context has really forced many of us to be refugees in someone country. So how can all these perfect papers, and guidelines that the AU has, and even including the refugees and durable solution also for refugees, and I have been part of developing those documents, how can it be put in practice? Thank you so much, and I hope really we enjoy our continent as African, and we also enjoy our countries before someone countries to really live in peace. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rabab. I think Ambassador Nhlapo has partially answered your question in relation to the AU. It's something that we can take up and discuss if it's something that is possible or feasible or a recommendation from the webinar. I'm going to call upon you, Geraldine, while other colleagues, we don't have any more hands. Geraldine, would you like to come in?
Yes, Fina, I have my hand up.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see. Sorry. Sorry, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Yes, good afternoon. Nozipo January Badil speaking, and thank you once again for the panelists. And the conversation has been very, very enlightening in many ways. My contribution, or my comment rather, is that I think we have let our government off the hook in our conversation, to be honest with you. And I think that the issue of scapegoating people from other countries is one that we need to see in the context of what we are not doing for our own citizens in South Africa. I think the levels of poverty, of squalor, and just water, electricity, basic needs, housing shortages have really made our people very, very unhappy and discontent. Because other than being citizens, we are all also rights holders. And I think we should begin to think about ourselves, not just as citizens, but also of rights holders, because we are subject of our constitutions, which gives us those rights. And to the extent that we don't receive, many of us who live in squalor do not feel like, we are worth anything. And when we feel worthless, other people become worthless as well, the way we look at them. And I think the scapegoating of non-South African citizens who we live peaceably by, because in many ways we live with people all the time from outside other countries. And then a moment comes when somehow the vigilantes, and I will call them vigilantes because they were certainly not acting on all our behalves, and the government didn't send them to get rid of the so-called foreigners. But it seemed so easy to do that. And when you spoke to people, it was quite shocking. I think everybody went through some form of personal trauma to watch others being kicked out so easily by people who chose a date to say by the 30th of June, this must have happened. And I must ask the question, where was our government at the time? Why was it so easy to set a date to get rid of so many people and tell them to go to where they didn't even know where they were going? So I think let's not diminish the problem and make it as if it belongs elsewhere. How are we going to stop or avoid being isolated as South Africa and avoid being divided and ruled? And I think the first principles is that we need to sort out the issues in our own country so that the people don't feel like they're worthless and therefore see others as being worthless as well, and make it so easy for people to organize. They have the right. Of course, the Constitution gives us all the right to express ourselves, to protest, but it shouldn't give us the right to be inhuman to others. And therefore, I really think we must engage with our government next time we have a conversation like this. Let's call the politicians of our country and engage with them and express our unhappiness with what has happened, because it shouldn't happen. It happened in 2008, and there we were told that it happened because there was an election in Zimbabwe, and the Zimbabweans wanted to get their people to go and vote in Zimbabwe, and I'm not quite sure what the right answer to that one was in 2008. But yeah, it's been a painful experience, and I also would like to add those who apologize deeply for what happened, because South Africans are definitely not xenophobic. Mostly people live side by side with each other peaceably. This was a moment, I think, where we needed to say we need to do something different to avoid it happening again. Thank you. Thank you, Geraldine, for organizing.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Mujangu, is your hand up?
There's another hand before mine.
Dennis, is it a new hand or an old hand?
No, it's an old hand.
Okay, thank you. Please go ahead, Mujangu.
Thank you very much. Can I just pick up on the answer to my question from Bayo? And I think I just want to pick on one issue. He referenced political education. And I want to ask, what Nkosazana said is pertinent here, that there must be something to what happened in South Africa recently. You don't have a young lady, yes, very articulate, but he didn't even work in a national radio station or whatever, just overnight have a national footprint and capacity to mobilize in the manner that we saw. So clearly, there will be interests that seek to isolate South Africa from the rest of the continent. But as Nkosazana says, and I agree totally with you, to go for the rest of the continent as well. So if that is clear to somebody sitting in a corner like myself, or somebody at least as exposed as Dr. Dlamini-Zuma is, why is that not clear to our leaders on the continent? For them to say, South Africa is one of us. if there are issues, we will go and discuss them with us. No one is going to separate us. This is one of us. And that's the first part. Bio, did we drop the political education? Or, are we missing the political education level that we need from our leaders? That's the first part. The second part of this political education is that I have found very articulate South Africans who know that South Africans are not xenophobic. Over 100 years ago, it's African brothers and sisters that worked on the mines. A quarter or more of Zimbabwe's population is South African when Mzilikas went there, and also including Malawi and Zambia. We are one people. So how did we drop the political education side of our population? Because I have found, lecturers and everybody who say, no, but these people must go, they're taking our jobs, despite the statistics that were presented to us by one of the panelists, that there is no scientific basis for that. So how did we miss, communicating who we are, who we've always been to our people, and then also to our leaders? And let me join Lolo. Thank you for reminding us in apologizing profusely for what happened, what the Mozambican High Commissioner said is really sad. We can't have women giving birth in toilets and everything. And we have seen many of that. The human rights of people, your right to dignity attaches to you, not to geography. It is not, it moves around with you. I was telling a story recently that I found myself illegal in Germany, but I was treated like a human being because that dignity, right to dignity, to life, attaches to me, not to the fact that I'm in South Africa or I'm in Zimbabwe or in Germany. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mjangu. Benedictus.
How are you? Can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
By introduction, I'm Benedictus, Zimbabwean by birth, stayed in South Africa for over 15 years, and currently relocated to the UK. Two things which I have to mention, and I echo what has been said by the earlier speakers. The first point is, when we talk about this Pan-Africanism, I think the concept more, it seems to be only be discussed around the immigration, and is the noise coming in from this when we're targeting to tell like the citizens to say when they complain about we're not getting jobs, illegal immigration, and they say, look, we are all Africans. But the same token is not applied when we're actually addressing the real cause of this influx movement of people. As an example, someone mentioned about the Zimbabwean case in 2008. People were killed, there was political instability there. But we have our leaders in African Union, we have leaders in SADC. No one condones those behaviors. Secondly, now we're talking about in Zimbabwe, right now in the midst of this immigration, the president changed the constitution, removed the elections. What happened? During that period, we had a president in Southern Africa, who is actually the chair of SADC, flying over to visit and have lunch with the same president, whose citizens are actually complaining about the illegal immigration. And that same country's citizens are the one causing some of the influx in that other country. So it's kind of a double standard here, whereby we have the citizens fighting amongst each other who are not the decision makers, who cannot influence policies, but the picture coming out is the top executive political elites having dinner together, having lunch together, but we are fighting at the bottom. I'm talking this about it. People are talking about it as illegal immigrants and stuff. It's close to my heart because the first week when it happened, I lost a brother who was shot, who was killed daylight as a result of these immigration issues. I can tell you this guy, he was legal. He has his papers, but he died. He died because he He was in the wrong place at the wrong time. And the fact that he was also not South African. I can't say South Africans are xenophobic because all my relationships are in South Africa. Most people I'm dear to are in South Africa, so I can't call that. But I call this to be political selfish of people as this. There's a trend when all these keep on happening towards the election. People are voting to get votes over the dignity of citizens, over shunning away from addressing the critical issues which is there. There is an elephant in the room. Mismanagement of different countries. Everyone wants to get home. How do we deal with that situation rather than finger pointing each other to say this one is xenophobic, someone is trying to divide us? The issue is let's address the governance across the region.
Thank you very much. I'm going to be asking our panelists to have their last say in 3 minutes, and then afterwards I will hand over to Geraldine, who's going to conclude our webinar with some way forward. In your 3 minutes, if possible, you could come up with one recommendation on the way forward. Besides answering the questions that have been asked, we won't be able to give answers to all the questions in this webinar. I will start, Prof, I'll spare you starting with you, Prof Adebayo. I will start with Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, please. Your last word.
What's it? Oh, okay. Thank you very much. I want to just talk about something that was raised about elections and Afrophobia. I would say yes, some political parties do use this for electioneering. We have seen some leaders of political parties standing in the streets and saying, Abahambe. But at the same time, I agree that government didn't do its work even prior to the 30th, because it's the government's work to make sure that there is legality in the country, that everything is okay, and protect the citizens that need to be protected, need everyone to be protected. Refugees are here legally. If you are a refugee, you are here legally. So I think government needs to do more to make sure that, one, citizens understand that people are here, have rights and have dignity. But also would not allow citizens to take on responsibilities that they shouldn't be taking, like asking people for documents. No citizen must be allowed to be asking for documents. And I think Prof. Adebayo was right, that one day, if you're asking for, in fact, it's not one day, we've seen it. In KZN, some of the people who come from Limpopo were asked for documentation and they were told they are not citizens by citizens. So if we are not careful, this can go into tribal conflict as well. So I think we should just make sure that government does. But also us as citizens, we must hold the government accountable. We mustn't run to the AU. The AU is not an implementing agent. It's the governments, it's the states that are implementing agents. So the AU can't come to South Africa and implement what should be implemented. It can only discuss it there, get agreement, but the member states must then do the implementation. So I also agree with the apology. And the way we should really apologize is to stop this from continuing. We should speak out. Yes, government has a responsibility, but all of us who are not Afrophobic must speak out. We can blame others, but Tina, did we speak out against what was happening? We should speak out, and our public broadcaster must also take its responsibility in ensuring that it broadcasts the positive messages that this should not really happen, that we are not xenophobic as South Africans, and this is wrong. So, yes, I also agree that we must fix our countries. That's why I was saying we must take charge of our development, because if people are poor, they will be angry. And when they are angry, they'll take it out on anyone that they can take it out on. They probably won't reach us in government. I'm not in government anymore, but they won't be able to reach government, but they can reach a neighbor who comes from somewhere else and then take it out. So we must fix our country, but we must also be active citizens ourselves, because it's so also very well to sit and point fingers. We must also be active as citizens and say what we don't want and say what we want and do what we want. There were some active citizens who kept calling we spent sleepless nights because some active citizens were calling and saying, hey, this is what is happening here. And then you call government people and say, can you attend to this situation there and there? So there were some active citizens, and I think we must thank them. But all of us who are against it must be active. That would be my view. And I don't think we should allow politicians from whichever party to use the issue of Africans who are in South Africa to gain votes. They must gain votes by what they've done themselves to improve the lives of the people, not by scapegoating other people.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your concluding remarks. Faatima?
Thank you so much, but I think nothing further from my side.
Thank you. I saw a hand, a new hand, it has disappeared. Do you want to say something in 3 minutes? Say? Ngaba. Can you take the floor? Can you hear me?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, 3 minutes, please.
The first thing, I think Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, when I was listening and other speakers say it very loudly, but I want to reduce the problem, because this is not a unique South African problem. Whilst this is a problem that South Africa was confronted with, I'm reminded of the Rwandan situation between the Tutsi and the Hutu. And if you look at research and what happened there, almost for a month, people being killed, plus minus 1.3 million people, plus minus 500,000 women were raped just in a very short space of time. And the world was quiet when that thing was happening in Rwanda, which was based on tribalism in the main. And in the South African context, we had it in the period between the 90s to 1994, the demon of tribalism between the Xhosas and the Zulus in Johannesburg and in KZN, between the IFP and the ANC. Therefore, the main problem we have as Africans, firstly, it emanates from colonialism, which define us according to boundaries. And we must not be narrow, comrades. when we look into the problems that were confronted and not look into what the foreign hand might be doing as we speak. We think that this is only our problem, that those who colonized us do not have a hand in dividing Africans as we speak. And I'm raising that because the balance of forces in Africa are shifting because of the international conditions that we're seeing, in particular the role of the Americans in the African affairs. And we must not naively say what has been happening in South Africa, it's just unique in the South African context. Therefore, I'm saying I agree with Nkosazana. We must be vocal about it, but also we must look at the trends internationally and also the hands of the superpowers into destabilizing our countries. And I think there might be that element in the South African context. Thank you.
Very much for supporting that view. Jenna?
Thanks so much. My recommendation comes from the previous speakers and people that have commented. I think the two recommendations are that Africa needs to come together, and exactly what the previous person was commenting on, that this is happening across Africa. So the narrative mechanisms might be different, but we need to be working together. So for example, we have people working for us across Africa, and we need to be all coming together from across Africa to monitor the narratives on the online environment and what disinformation narratives are being used for exactly that, for that divide and conquer strategy. And the more we come together across Africa, the more we understand each other's context, we're sharing knowledge, we building understanding, and we're building digital resilience to these attacks that are happening. The xenophobia conversation in South Africa online has decreased in the last week or so, and it's very likely that they will try. I think one of the other speakers made a comment about the white genocide narrative, which is also a very manipulated narrative. It's very likely that they will try those other narratives as well. So we need to be vigilant, and we need to be vigilant across Africa and stop this from happening.
Thank you. Prof. Adebayo, your last word.
Well, I would like to simply suggest that we're at a point where we need to rebuild social contracts in South Africa and in the rest of the continent. That whole fact that the relationship in citizens and the state, which have frayed in recent years, and the loss of trust in politicians and in political parties, and the failure of governments to deliver basic services, not just in South Africa, but across the continent. We need to revisit that comprehensively. Our chairperson, Esfina, will remember the discourse that was going on in Zimbabwe at the time when Mozambican refugees flowed into Zimbabwe, and the idea that nobody imagined that a few years later, Zimbabwe itself will be generating so many people crossing the borders. And that's a story which has repeated itself across different parts of the continent. So, as Ali Masri once said, we're all Africans in the same boat. People of the day before yesterday and people of the day after tomorrow. Let us allow freedom of movement on the continent. Let states be held accountable in terms of their constitutional obligations, particularly where it entails a strong element of revival of the social contract. And yes, let us not take it for granted that there is no external hand in what has been going on. Who has been financing the most recent movement in South Africa? It's one thing for people to march for 1 week. It's something else for people to sustain anti-African foreigners campaigns for as long as these folks have done. And even if one does not have concrete evidence of what kind of intervention has been taking place, there's enough reason to believe that many of the actors in the international system, after the ICJ case and the condemnation of Gaza and others, have reason to want to either do regime change or fragment the continent further, be better to dominate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you so much. I'm now going to call upon the Beijing Plus 30 African Women's Movement Chair and Convener, Geraldine. You heard everything that was said. Please, over to you, Geraldine.
Thank you very much, everyone. And I think let me also thank our panelists for making yourselves available. And I think for some it was a pretty short notice as well. We engaged with quite a challenging and difficult reality confronting us. And I must state up front that for the Beijing Plus 30 movement, we were nudged by a sister from Senegal who actually said to us one day, what if I ask a difficult question? And the question is the treatment of non-South Africans or African migrants in South Africa. We felt we could not deal with that issue immediately. We needed to take time to prepare for this and to have a panel that would actually help stimulate us and raise the difficult questions, because we know within the movement there are some people who do not wish to see a particular reality that is out there. So first, we must challenge the misconception that African migrants are in South Africa in a purely extractive manner. The evidence before us and what has been raised today tells us a very different story, and we heard it through our panel members. African migrants make a significant contribution to our economy, accounting for an estimated 9% of South Africa's GDP. To put that into perspective, that's almost the equivalent of the Western Cape to our national economy. So they are not merely beneficiaries of our economy, they are active participants in building it. And as we were told by different members of our panel, we as Africans are all owe it to this continent for our being, and we should not see ourselves in a narrow nationalistic manner. But this does not mean that we're going to let any government off the hook in terms of ensuring that they contribute to the development of the African economy and the economies of their country, as well as to regional integration as required. It has already been said in many different ways today, but it bears repeating. that the anti-apartheid struggle was sustained by the solidarity of the African continent. So when we left into exile, we didn't go to Europe. We went to Botswana, we went to Lesotho, Swaziland, Mozambique, and many of the other countries. And we should remember that. Many newly independent African nations provided funding, military support, and refuge to those fighting for our liberation. And that history should never be forgotten. We can never be apolitical or ahistorical about where we are. But this is not only a matter of historical gratitude. I think, let me repeat that. It is not only a matter of historical gratitude. Today, we remain deeply interconnected with our neighbors. We are economic partners, and we are also dependent on one another's resources. Dr. Dlamini-Zuma gave us a very graphic, clear example when she says, Gauteng's water supply is one example of this interdependence, and let us not forget that or take it for granted. South Africa does not exist in isolation. Our prosperity is inseparable from our nation. That does not mean that our government should not take responsibility for ensuring that service delivery is at the levels required. But let's not be duped by what has gone out as misinformation. And we believed it because it's been repeated enough on TikTok, on Instagram, and elsewhere. Secondly, as both Dr. Dlamini-Zuma and Jenna-Lee Strugnell have highlighted, we must recognize that the rise in hatred and division is not entirely organic. Professor Adebayo also made this point. There is a deliberate effort to inflame tensions, particularly online through bots, fake accounts, and coordinated disinformation campaigns. And the presentation we got was quite chilling in terms of this. So this is not something we can dismiss. It requires serious investigation by both government and civil society. Dr. Dlamini-Zuma also made a profound observation when she talked about white genocide and Afrophobia being two sides of the same coin. Both are manufactured narratives designed to sow fear, deepen division, and weaken social cohesion. So we must therefore ask a simple but essential question. Who benefits from a weakened South Africa? And indeed, who benefits from a weakened Africa? We should never forget, we are part of this continent. We are Africans. As Faatima reminded us, our laws exist to protect the most vulnerable. And this is one of the great achievements of our liberation movement, and it's an achievement we cannot afford to squander. As Professor Olukoshi cautioned, these campaigns rarely stop with foreign nationals. Today the target may be migrants, tomorrow it will be fellow South Africans, as we've seen. And the challenge is not a lack of laws, it is the failure to implement them consistently. Our courts, working hand in hand with the state, must make it clear that there is no place for vigilantes or self-appointed enforcers who take the law into their own hands. When individuals usurp the authority of the state, they don't only undermine the rule of law, but the very foundations of our constitutional democracy. Finally, we cannot ignore the elephant in the room. It is profoundly dishonest to point fingers at pregnant women seeking medical care or children seeking an education when at the very same time scandals such as the Tembisa hospital corruption scandal are unfolding before our own eyes. 2 billion siphoned off from Tembisa. And do we follow up on the corruptors? And we know they are? No. We decide to march against those who are vulnerable. Billions of rands have allegedly been looted from public hospitals and a public hospital, and that's on record. So to blame migrants for the strain on our healthcare system while corruption strips that system of resources it desperately needs is not only misleading, it is dishonest and it is morally indefensible. If we're serious about protecting our public services, then our fight must be against corruption, theft, and equitable service delivery, not against the vulnerable. And those of you who are not public servants, do you hold your public service relatives accountable on whether they are earning their salary at the end of every month? Or are you ready to point elsewhere? Because as we are reminded, we are all rights holders. But let's ensure we hold the right people accountable. And yes, government must be held accountable, and governments across the continent must. So South Africa is strongest when it upholds the values of solidarity, constitutionalism, and human dignity. Those values were won through our freedom, and they remain our best defense against division today. And there are many in this virtual meeting who gave their all at a point, not expecting a return, because we believed in these values. But we also believe that the citizens across the continent must be able to access services, development, and the challenge was put out today. Let's work towards development on our continent, but it must be integrated development. We cannot and will not be an island. And we're ready to call out all those who make an assumption differently. Because as was stated, we are Africans. We love this continent. We love all ourselves as fellow Africans, and we shall not be divided. But we will also not accept inequality, poverty, and unemployment. Thank you for your time, for joining us today. We are going to follow through and specifically look at the questions that have been raised and the challenges pointed to us. I should, in conclusion, just state, moderator, that we were to be live streamed on Bilal TV, but they had a challenge with the link, and they have requested us to share the recording of the session today for them to beam across the continent, because I think all Africans need to be part of this discussion as we build an African compact, and we build compacts in all our countries. Thank you very much, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Geraldine. And I think with those words, I can just say, fellow Africans, Thank you for the beautiful afternoon we spent together and the ideas that we shared. And have a good evening. We'll see you in our next engagement. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's please.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Minister Zuma.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Shukran.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.